How was this burial site first discovered?
Well, it was actually exposed by raising sea level. So earlier in the year, there was a really high king tide that was combined with storm surges, and it cut into the dunes in an area where the sea had never been before. And it is actually the highest sea level on record, or king tide. So, it's the changing of the sea level that's destroying Aboriginal heritage, and it exposed these ancestral remains.
Tell us what you found there then.
Well, it was actually a local who was walking along the beach, then contacted the traditional owners, the Karaweg people, and they called us up to do a rescue excavation of the remains. And we revealed a complete articulated burial of a young woman. She had some fairly terrible trauma in her lower abdomen. We believe she was speared through the lower abdomen, and also some trauma in her left humerus. The burial had all the sort of signs of a traditional Aboriginal burial. So, she was likely murdered, but it was a really respectful burial, about 1.5 metres down to the dune. And the traditional owners carefully, they stood beside us while we did the excavations, and there were lots of omens that they called upon. Butterflies came down and in mass and sat beside the site, and there was a kookaburra that sat above the excavation, and they saw this as a very positive thing, and we carefully recovered the remains after 2 days and moved it back into the higher ground, so you could see the old ancient dune system. So the dunes there have not been exposed for 4,000 or 5,000 years, it's just it was a really, I guess, fortuitous that she was eroding head first and someone could recognise the remains that were exposed.
And how old are those bones, Michael?
It's a challenging one. We actually, the Australian National University is doing the carbon dating for us, but we don't have the results yet. The wear patterns on her teeth indicated that she was living on a traditional diet. So we know the sea level wasn't really up at that height until about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, when it's about 1.5 metres higher. So she could be anywhere between 4,000 and 200 years old. Yeah. Terrible at trying to work out the age of burials. I thought a burial I looked at Western Cape York was a couple of 100 years old, and she ended up being 3,500 years. So until we get the absolute dates, it's a bit hard to say.
Yeah. Are there other skeletons at this site, Michael?
Yes, well, importantly, my colleague Kelsey Lowe, who's a geoarchaeologist, used ground-penetrating radar and identified 4 other anomalies in that site area. So Enid Tom, one of the elders who actually directed the research, she sort of said, look, traditionally we did bury people in the dunes. There's some amazing ethnohistoric accounts by a woman called Barbara Thompson, who in the early 19th century lived with the Karaweg people for several years, and she recorded the types of burials. So there's information about the mortuary rituals and people being interred in these beach dunes. So we expect there to be more. As the sea level continues to rise and damage and destroy these sites, I suspect more and more significant sites will be undermined and washed into the sea, and unless something is done to monitor how we look after these places.